What if the person you trusted the most was the one who hurt you the deepest? In small-town America, where churches sit on every corner and faith is a way of life, what happens when the voice from the pulpit hides a predator? This is my story. And it might be someone else's too. I was born in a dusty little town somewhere between cotton fields and winding dirt roads in Alabama, a place where Sunday dinners meant fried chicken, sweet tea, and pie still warm from the oven. Our house was small, just a few rooms with creaky floors and no air conditioning, but it was filled with warmth. My mom cleaned with lavender water and hope. My dad worked the fields until the sun burned red behind the trees. We didn't have money, but we had prayer. And every Sunday, rain or shine, we dressed in our best and walked to the wooden chapel at the end of the dirt road. My yellow Sunday dress, hand-stitched by Mom, was my uniform. That chapel was everything to us. Singing hymns with your eyes closed, the smell of fresh-cut flowers near the altar, people hugging like family. It felt like God's living room. At the center of that little church was Pastor Elijah. He wasn't just a preacher. He was the man of God. Mom called him a light in the dark. He had silver hair, a soft but deep voice, and this calm way of looking at people that made you feel like you mattered. When I was 10, I believed every word he said. When he preached, I thought I could hear heaven echo back. After service, he'd shake everyone's hand. But when he shook mine, he'd hold it longer, smile deeper. Mom would whisper, "See? He knows you're special." I believed her. I felt like God had noticed me. My days were simple. School, helping with chores, picking peaches in the backyard, and always preparing for Sunday service. Then one Sunday morning, everything started to shift. Pastor Elijah asked if I wanted to help more at church. I said yes. Of course I did. He said, "God sees you, Marianne. He's pleased." From that day on, I started coming early. I'd set up chairs, arrange wildflowers in an old vase for the altar, and tidy the hymn books before anyone arrived. One morning, while I was setting flowers, he came up behind me. He smiled and said, "Such grace in your hands. God's going to bless you, child." Then he rested his hand on my shoulder, lightly, but it lingered. At home, I told Mom. She smiled like it was a gift. "God's working through him," she said. "You're on the right path." And I believed her, because back then, I didn't know what it meant to doubt a man of God. Weekdays, he started asking me to stop by the church. "Just little things," he said. "Drop off this, help with that." The church would be quiet then, the air still, too still, and sometimes he looked at me in ways that made my stomach feel tight. One day, as I stacked hymn books, he stood behind me longer than usual. "You're growing into a lovely young lady," he said. "The boys will be lining up soon." I didn't know what to say. I smiled nervously, looked down, tried to laugh. When I told my mom, she just giggled. "Oh, that's Pastor Elijah," she said. "You're still just a baby." But I didn't feel like a baby anymore. I felt watched. He started asking me to sit closer during service, to help him carry his Bible to the pulpit, to stay behind and clean the altar when everyone left. He said it was God's work, that I was special, chosen. I didn't have words back then for what I was feeling. I just knew my chest felt heavy when he got too close. And that something about the way he said, "God is watching," didn't feel holy anymore. If you've ever felt something was wrong, even when everyone else said it was right, share this story. Someone out there needs to know they're not crazy. That gut feeling, it matters. The chapel became part of my daily rhythm. School, chores, church. Pastor Elijah started asking for more help, bringing him small things, staying a little longer, after prayer meetings, coming in when no one else was around. Mom was proud. She'd tell the neighbors, "Pastor Elijah says my daughter's got a heart for the Lord." Dad, exhausted from long days at the mill, would smile and say, "You're doing good, baby girl. God's got his hand on you." I believed them, because who would question a pastor? He always spoke so gently, always had that Bible in hand. He'd ask about my homework, my chores, my thoughts on scripture. He called me a child of light. He said I had a pure heart that God had personally placed in my chest. At 10 years old, I didn't know what grooming meant, but now I do. One day, my mom sent me to deliver a loaf of cornbread to the pastor's office. It was a tiny room tucked behind the chapel. I knocked, and he opened the door with his usual warm smile. He said, "The church always feels brighter when you're here." Then he invited me in, sat in his chair, asked me to sit close and tell him about my day. I talked, nervously twisting my fingers. He nodded slowly, watching me too closely, then said, "You're like a flower, blooming so fast. One day, the world will see how beautiful you've become." I didn't understand what he meant, but my cheeks flushed. Something in me felt uneasy. That night, I told my mom. She laughed, said, "He's just being kind. That's his way." But something about the way he spoke, how his voice dropped when he said I was growing, left. A coldness in my stomach I couldn't shake. More requests came. Help me sort the altar cloths. Clean the prayer room. Stay a little longer after service. And I did it all, because I thought I was helping God. Because my mom called me Pastor Elijah's little blessing. Because my dad said I was making the family proud. One day while I cleaned the back pews, he approached me from behind again, laid a hand on my shoulder, squeezed, slowly. "You're different from the other kids," he said. "God has set you apart." I stood frozen. I wanted to pull away, but I didn't. Because when you're 10, and the whole town treats someone like a prophet, you don't know you're allowed to say no. That night, I didn't mention it. I prayed instead. Laid in bed staring at the ceiling fan, whispering to God, "If something's wrong, please tell me." But all I heard was silence. Days passed. I kept going, to school, to church, playing less, laughing less, but still pretending. The fear growing quietly inside me like a weed no one could see. Then something happened that changed everything. Mom asked me to drop off a small stitched cloth she'd made for the altar. I walked to the chapel with it folded neatly in my arms, sun dipping low in the sky. When I knocked, he opened the door with that same smile. But this time, it felt different. He looked me up and down. Said, "You're glowing today, like spring after a long winter." My hands clenched around the cloth. I smiled weakly. He told me to come in. Said he wanted to show me something about trust and faith. I stood near the door, but he motioned me closer. Talked about how obedience was the highest form of worship. How sometimes God gives us special assignments, and that I was one of those. He reached out, brushed my hair with his hand, slid his fingers down to my shoulder, squeezed. Again. Then he said something I will never forget. "You're becoming a woman. God gave you to me to guide. That's sacred." My mouth went dry. I nodded. I didn't understand. But something inside me screamed. And when he said, "This is our secret, just between us and God," I believed him, because I was a child, and I was afraid. If you're watching this and your heart is heavy, please don't carry it alone. Like, share, or comment, even anonymously. Sometimes just knowing we're not crazy is the first step to healing. After that day at the kitchen table, I knew I was truly alone. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped praying. Every time I heard church bells, my stomach twisted. Every time someone said Pastor Elijah's name, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mom praised him like a saint. My dad still said he was a good man doing the Lord's work. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent because I was 10. And the man who broke me said if I spoke, God would punish me. At school, Lucy never gave up on me. One day she pulled me aside, held my hand and said, "You don't have to tell me everything, but I'm here when you're ready." That night I finally broke. Alone in my room, I cried louder than I ever had. The following week, I couldn't avoid the church anymore. Mom dragged me there, saying Pastor Elijah had forgiven me for being distant. He smiled at me when I arrived, called me his faithful little helper in front of everyone. My hands trembled so much, I dropped the flowers I was carrying. He leaned in, touched my back, and whispered, "God is proud of you. You're doing the right thing." I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. That night, I prayed, but not to God, to anyone. Anyone who could hear me and take me out of that nightmare. Years passed like that, living inside myself, walking through life like a ghost, helping in church, obeying at home, smiling when expected, until he was transferred to another town. Gone, just like that. I was 12, but he didn't leave empty-handed. He took pieces of me, pieces I'd never get back. My teen years were quiet. I didn't date, didn't trust, didn't look people in the eye. Then at 15, something shifted. Lucy and I were walking home. She looked at me and said, "I can't stand seeing you this way anymore." And I told her. Every whisper, every touch, every command disguised as scripture. I wept as I spoke, and she held me. She didn't say it was my fault. She believed me. She helped me find the courage to tell my mom. One night, I sat her down. I told her everything, and she didn't believe me. Said I was lying, that God would punish me, that I was confused. That broke something even deeper. I stopped trying. At 18, I left town, moved to another state, found a job in a sewing shop owned by a woman named Miss Zelda. She taught me to sew, taught me to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander too far. But the trauma followed me. I had nightmares, flashbacks. I couldn't walk past a chapel without shaking. Miss Zelda found me crying and asked. I told her everything. And for the second time in my life, someone believed me. She introduced me to a group of women, survivors. Women who knew what it was like to carry silence like a second skin. I kept sewing. I opened my own shop. I stayed away from home. My mother died, never knowing. My father died without asking. But I shared my story in rooms filled with women who carried their own. If this story touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to know healing is possible, even when the pain never fully leaves. And if you're still here with me, thank you. Please consider subscribing, because stories like mine matter, and someone out there needs to hear them.